Well, good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
Come on, you guys. You can't rely on just Bob here. Hold on. We are 3 months into this thing. It is October 3rd, so I'm going to do it again, and this is the last time that I chastise you all. Good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
All right. Excellent. You got to help Bob out here.
That didn't sound fake at all.
What's that?
Didn't sound fake at all.
Didn't sound fake at all, is what he said. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm pleased to say I'm your president, Kevin Kassir. Welcome, everybody. Thanks to Jeff Stickle and our new member, Dr. Ian Roberts, for being greeters today. I'd like to invite Susan Schomburg up to the podium to give us our moment of inspiration, lead us in the four-way Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test, and then we'll have an opportunity to greet each other. Susan?
Our honored speaker today is Monty Shaw, who's the CEO of Iowa Renewable Fuel Association. So it makes sense that our inspiration today is made up of quotes regarding renewable. I thought there wouldn't be any, au contraire. There were so many. This from a man named Amory Lovins. People do not want electricity or oil, but rather comfortable rooms, vehicular motion, food, tables, and other real things. True enough. This from Barack Obama. To truly transform our economy, protect our security, and save our planet from the ravages of climate change, we need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. Right? On the other hand, this is surprisingly from Rupert Murdoch. We need to push ourselves to make as many reductions as possible in our own energy first, and that takes time. But we must do this quickly. The climate will not wait for us. Imagine Rupert saying that. Ralph Nader, always acerbic, says, the use of solar energy has not been opened up because the oil industry does not own the sun. This from votesolar.com. When there is a solar energy spill, we call it a nice day. A man named Thomas Carr says the word energy incidentally equates with the Greek word for challenge. I think there is much to learn in thinking about our federal energy problem in that light. Further, it's important for us to think about energy in terms of the gift of life. Now, singer Sheryl Crow may not be an expert, but I think she's right about this. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use in the first place. Right? Now, this source is a fascinating one. This is a person that I've done some reading and research about. Really an interesting fellow. The use of plant oil as fuel may seem insignificant today, but such products can in time become just as important as kerosene and these coal tar products. That was from Rudolf Diesel, who invented the diesel engine, which originally was designed to run on peanut oil. Surprising, isn't it? Yeah. None other than Thomas Edison said, I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait till oil and coal run out before we tackle that. And finally, my friends, this is a quote from Susan Schomburg. The source of our energy should not be determined by the political power of current energy companies. We lost a pretty good passenger rail system to the tire industry that way in the 1950s. The way we power our homes, run our industry, and fuel our vehicles should be a matter of innovative science and thoughtful economics. the world we leave our children and grandchildren depends upon. Now please join me in the Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the four-way test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Now please greet your fellow Rotarians.
All right, everybody, thank you very much. We're now going to introduce our guest for today. As I introduce you, please stand and remain standing, and then we'll recognize you all at once. So first, we have Cindy Snell, wife of Mark Snell and guest of Mark. We have Cassie Nassif, credit analyst with Bankers Trust, and her husband Gene Nassif, an attorney at Schindler and Anderson Law Firm and an owner of Cat's Eye Distillery. And Gene's father and I grew up together back in Cedar Rapids, so he's a guest of mine. I've asked the Stuyvesants to host them today. So welcome, everybody. And for Gene, if you like whiskey, you might want to look him up after. Also, I see we are blessed with Greg Edwards in the audience today, and congratulations on bringing the NCAA basketball tournament back to Des Moines in 2028. So great job, Greg. All right, our community service committee is just doing a great job of putting plans in place and getting after it. In fact, they're having a committee meeting right after our meeting today. If you'd like to join them. Right now, they're in full swing with Operation Warm Coat Drive. You can help buy a new coat for a child in need, just $25. There's info on the table to sign up. We're at about 122 coats. Their goal was 300 coats. So we've got a ways to go. So I'd like you to think about this. A nice dinner out with a spouse or partner, drinks, tip, easy to get to $100, right? That same $100 can buy 4 coats for some needy kids. So think about that. We've got, what, Kitty, another week? And then we're at the deadline. So please help out with that. Next is where in the world was Club 27? And there you see some pictures of the great time a week ago at Jester Park. So thanks to Rich Leopold that hosted us at that unbelievable location. It was a beautiful night. Thank you to our anonymous donor that made it possible to keep the costs affordable. We had over 60 Rotarians, families, guests, It was a great night of barbecue and drinks and live music, so encourage you. I know Tim is thinking of keeping that going, right, Tim?
Sure.
Next year? So,
It's on you, right, Kevin?
so remember from a year from now, get that on your calendar. It was a great time. Next, we have Did You Know segment, and in honor of our keynote speaker, we're going to cover corn. And as Iowans, we should know these things, shouldn't we? So here we go. Here's one specific to our speaker today. How many pounds, approximately, get close here, approximately how many pounds of corn does it take to make 1 gallon of ethanol? I'm gonna have to just be close.
5,000.
Not close. What's that?
50.
Closer.
40.
Closer.
25.
20. Lowitz, you get it. All right. Here's an easier question. We all hear about we have bushels, right? How many bushels did we grow in an acre? That type of thing, right? Those in Iowa, we've always heard of this. How many pounds of corn is in a bushel?
56.
Right on. 56. Mark Snow. There you go.
I know that because I had to do it when I was a kid.
And here's my favorite question of all. We all see those stalks of corn as we drive through the Iowa landscape. How many ears of corn is on one stalk?
1.
Very good. Congratulations, everybody. I didn't expect that. That was pretty good.
I think it was pretty corny.
All right, well, that leads perfectly into Rotarians on the floor laughing. And we're giving Doug and Skeet a break, but we've got a cartoon. Can everybody see that?
Turn it upside down.
Nobody gets it? It's a globe thing, and you shake, and he's raking up the leaves, and he says, no. Okay, I thought that was pretty funny.
We didn't pick that.
All right, so that's why I'm not in charge of that. Now it is time, and my pleasure, to introduce a new member, and these are my favorite parts of these meetings. Dr. Ian Roberts, who was good enough to sign up to be a greeter today, and he is the superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools. And Ian was sponsored by past President Becky Greenwald. A little bit about Ian before I get into the 5 questions. He's the 15th Des Moines superintendent. He grew up between Brooklyn, New York, and Guyana, one of 3 sons, and a graduate of Georgetown University. And what he didn't share with me, I hope I'm not gonna get in trouble, Ian, but I did a little research. Were you an Olympian for Guyana? Wow, so we now have an Olympian in our midst. So here are our 5 questions. You've got a free day. What would we find you doing? I'd be riding, reading a book, or running one of Central Iowa's many trails. Where in the world have you traveled that you can't go back, that you can't wait to go back to? I like to contribute to the Rotarian. He'd like to go back to Australia. Can't wait to visit again. What's the best piece of advice you've been given? And he says, the size of a coffin or urn should be a reminder that when your day comes, you are the only person or thing that will fit in there. So live your life accordingly. Very, very good. What talent or skill do you possess that you might surprise or delight people? He inherited the culinary skills of his mother, Verna, who intentionally passed that on to him. And now I'd like to bring up Ian to answer the last question and just to greet you all. So you're joining Rotary. What can't you wait to tell your friends about this organization? So Ian?
Thank you, and greetings, fellow Rotarians. Sounds great to be able to say that. Sounds really good. Tremendous gratitude to not only Becky, but many of you with whom I've crossed paths during my early visits, and it's so good to be here to be a part of this amazing group of folks. I think one thing that I'm looking forward to be able to share with a larger community in all of my travels is just grounded truly in the 4A tests, right? Any organization, any convening that truly values and anchors their daily lives in just a focus on goodwill and on service and seeking and sermonizing truth is an organization that I'm humbled and happy to be a part of. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you all. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Ian. We're honored to have you a member of our club. And now we will have Mark Snell introduce our program. Mark?
Today's speaker actually has Iowa roots, and I think we're going to hear a little bit about that. He may even tell us a little bit about an Earl May connection that is kind of off to the side, as I recall. And he does have an interesting background from the standpoint that he was having a little bit of a difficult time making sure he had a job that his future wife could actually handle. He actually began his career working with several campaigns and official offices with numerous candidates and officials, such as Steve Forbes, U.S. Senator Elizabeth Dole, U.S. Senator Charles Grassley, U.S. Senator Bob Dole, and U.S. Representative Jim Lightfoot. And I'm sure that he'll tell us a little bit about his Southwest Iowa roots from Shenandoah, and he's still connected there with some farming activities, as we were talking about today. He was raised on a corn and soybean farm just southwest of Shenandoah. He received his bachelor's degree in political science from Simpson College in Indianola, and he currently lives with his wife Tina, daughter Eden, and son Max, and the rescue dog. You didn't give me the name of the dog, so
Jackson.
I don't know.
Jackson.
Yeah, okay. And Monty Shaw, just to let you know what a talent he is, he's been head of the in the biofuels industry for over 20 years now. He joined the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association in 2005, and then following nearly 6 years as Director of Communications for the Renewable Fuels Association in Washington, D.C. So with that, I'd like to ask that we give Monty Shaw a Rotary welcome today.
Alrighty, well, I probably won't bore you with too much of my background. I'll hit a few things as I go through, but I'm hoping to talk about some big trends that we see right now that we think are going to impact the future of agriculture in a major way. I personally think we're at a crossroads, a fork in the road, if you will. And I think some of the decisions we make over the next couple of years will have a big impact on whether we continue down a path of prosperity or whether we might, hit a few more bumps in the road. But let me dig into that a little bit. I'm going to go through a bunch of these slides real quick at the beginning. If there's something you want to dig into, I'll try to leave some time for questions. But we're a state level trade association. As you mentioned, my first career was in politics. So every year you got fired. Hey, you won, you're fired. Hey, you lost, you're fired. The campaign's over. So I spent 10 years not being able to keep a job. And then for the last 25 years, apparently I haven't been able to find a new one. So I'm very happy to be back in Iowa for a long time now. We represent ethanol producers. Iowa's the #1 ethanol producing state. We chew up a lot of corn. It doesn't just go into ethanol. We just take the starch. I like to tell people the cows don't need the starch in their diet anymore, and I need more starch in my diet. All the protein goes right back into the feed markets like you would, and we just add value to that starch by turning it into a renewable fuel. We also represent biodiesel. In Iowa, soybeans is the #1 soybean oil. People are like, well, there's soybean oil and mayonnaise, but believe me, we make a lot more soybean oil. It was sitting around, it was literally going bad, you were paying to take it to dumps, it was going rancid, we had nothing to do with it, and the biodiesel industry came along and added value to that, which means when a soybean turns into oil and soybean meal, which again, protein for livestock. So if we can add more value to the oil side, that means the protein side is relatively speaking more affordable. So very proud about that. Ooh, hello. Let's go back. Here we go. I'm not going to go through these numbers. We're a big part of the economy. When you chew up 60% of Iowa's corn, you create a lot of jobs, create a lot of economic activity throughout the state, and particularly in rural areas, which having grown up in a small town, that's very important to me. So what I want to talk about is I grew up on a farm. I came of age in the 1980s. It was not a fun time to be on a farm. My school bus route, for about 2 years, I drove by a billboard. There was a 1-800 suicide hotline specifically directed at farmers. It was not a good time. I do not want to go back to the 1980s. The 1990s weren't really that much better. We just had better farm programs in place by the 1990s, so everything kind of leveled out, but we really didn't get better. When did we get better? When the renewable fuels industry started taking off in 2002 to 2005 is when we saw a dramatic shift. This is 1985, here's 2005, and we saw a dramatic shift with some good times up here. What I wasn't able to plot, because I wasn't smart enough to find it yesterday or 2 days ago when I was putting this together, is the cost of production has also gone up, right? So these are the price of corn, and you can see that renewable fuels had a huge shift. So what renewable fuels did from essentially 2000 to 2020 was suck up all the extra corn that our farmers grow, because what's the history of the American farmer? Overproducing their market. Give them a market and they'll overproduce it. And so we were able to suck up all that extra corn for 20 years. It's probably the best consistent 20 years in the history of American agriculture without a real sustained downturn in that time. It's never happened before. But what happened 2 or 3 years ago? Everybody, I hope you all use E10 or unleaded 88, E15, or like me, if you drive a flex fuel vehicle, I hope you're even using E85. But the whole country basically went to E10. 98% of our gasoline is now blended with ethanol. So we grew that out. There's nowhere else to go. We're working on some exports. But essentially, about 3 or 4 years ago, we kind of tapped out that main domestic market. And the only reason we haven't seen low corn prices before this over the last 4 years is we've had a 3-year drought and a war in Ukraine. And that kind of pushed off the reckoning. But the reckoning's here. We had corn prices at $3.68 earlier this year. That's below the cost of production today. That means farmers are losing money. That's not good. I don't want that. I don't want to go back to the 90s. I sure as heck don't want to go back to the 80s. So what do we think is driving some of this? Electric vehicles. You've seen a lot of hubbub of that. Some of you might drive them. That's fine. I think there's a place for electric vehicles. I don't think they're a be-all, end-all. I don't think they're quite the environmental savior if you actually do a full life cycle analysis of them that people say, but there's certainly places where they make sense. And I do think they're going to continue to grow and be a bigger part of our transportation. We're also seeing that it's probably not going to be as fast as some people wanted. Consumers are not buying them. You're seeing them pile up on the lot. So I do think the transition to EVs will be slower. That's good for us. If you want an EV, that's fine. I just don't want you to have an EV. I think there's a lot of opportunities to do things that are better. Hybrids, where we can actually pair a small engine, maybe we run it on E85 with the electric motor, and you can actually get a lot better environmental footprint than what it takes to go out and mine the rare earth metals and process them into the giant battery you need for a plug-in EV that has no alternative. So that's one thing that we're dealing with. The other thing is Brazil. Brazil for 40 years was going to take over the corn market from us. Well, they did. Last year, Brazil became the world's largest corn exporter. They have really found ways to grow more corn down there. With their environment, they can do a second crop. It's safrinha, that just means second crop. And it's given a really low carbon score, which I'll talk more about later. And so Brazil is finally, it's bad for us, but it's good for them. They finally figured out how to really take advantage of some of their farmland down there and do what we call double cropping. And it's putting a lot of pressure on our producers. So that's something we have to keep an eye on. Export markets. We are growing exports. We're going to have record exports this year. So we're grateful for that with ethanol. And then the real big thing is new uses. You've probably heard about sustainable aviation fuel. You might not have heard, it's the one, it's kind of like the thing that gets, it's the shiny new thing that gets all the attention, but the same thing is true for marine, rail, even heavy duty. I met with John Deere. They're working on an E100 engine that perhaps could compete and be more economical than the diesel engine. What I'll note and I'll get into is what do all these things have in common? Why would you pay more for sustainable aviation fuel than regular fuel? Because you want lower carbon. Why would you pay more for marine fuel than right now they're using bunker fuel? It's basically asphalt, it's horrible, it's really polluting. But why would they pay more? Because they're being told they need to lower carbon. Same thing for rail, same thing for heavy duty. So, okay, I talked a little bit about that, don't have time, talked a little about that. Exports. Exports, we now export about 1.6, we're gonna set a record this year, 1.6, 1.7 billion gallons of ethanol. To put that in perspective, if you drive across Iowa and you see an ethanol plant, you probably have. If you go about 30 miles in any direction, you should see one. Each one of those on average, some are bigger, some are smaller, but on average produces about 100 million gallons a year. So there are 16 to 17 ethanol plants in the United States. You don't say all from one, but just on average, there's 16 or 17 ethanol plants in the United States that are there operating solely because we can export it. What do our largest markets want? Canada. They enacted a low carbon fuel standard and they started importing, can I be crude? Is that okay? Is that allowed? No. I was just gonna say crap ton, that's a Southwest Iowa term. They import a lot of ethanol now over the last, I said crude, not over the road. The European Union, the UK, India, Brazil, and some of these others, South Korea, they're all importing this. Some are importing because it's the world's cheapest form of fuel octane, ethanol is. But most of them are importing this because they're trying to lower their carbon footprint. So that is what's driving exports. Everything after this first dot has to be low carbon, has to be low carbon, has to be low carbon, has to be low carbon. Well, and to sell into California, Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, and soon many of the Northeast states, you're gonna have to be low carbon. I'll go back to I'll let it in a second. So let me just stop here and say this. Some of you in this room may think that carbon emissions are an existential threat to the future of the human race. Some of you in this room may think that the whole focus on the Green New Deal or whatever word you want to put on it is just a political ploy for the government to take over more control of your life. I'm standing up here as a representative of the biofuels industry saying, we don't care. Because it's business. Our customers are telling us we want lower carbon products. So a lot of times I have people come up to me, particularly in rural areas and different places, like, oh, why are you playing to this? Why are you doing this? It's like, my board probably has people that fit across that spectrum of how they view this. This is not a political issue. So please understand as you hear about some of the things that farmers are talking about, biofuels are talking about, some of the policies, some of the projects we're trying to do, don't view it through a political lens. Way too much, I know it's silly season, way too much is viewed through a political lens. We're simply trying to do what farming has always done, which is make products, produce things that consumers want. I don't have to agree with it. I can think it's smart, I can think it's silly, I can think it's stupid, but if that's what my customer wants, how do I stay in business? By producing what they want. So right now, I mentioned E15 unleaded 88. We've got 8 states in the Midwest that are allowed to do that. A lot of the gas stations around Des Moines have that. You'll go up, you're used to see that little that yellow octane button, and it says 87 a lot, or if you, well, this crowd probably drives all those fancy cars, you gotta hit the 91, too bad. But for those of us in the sticks, you hit the 87 button. Well, now you'll see an 88 button. You're like, what is that? It's 5% more ethanol. Any car 2001 and newer can use it. So that's like basically every car that's on the road normally. And it's usually 15 to 25 cents less. You're actually getting more octane for a cheaper price because it's got more ethanol in it, and ethanol's more affordable than the petroleum. So we're still working to get that nationwide. That's one of our big goals. You'll hear us talk about year-round nationwide E15, unleaded 88. It's branded or marketed that way. They're the same thing. excuse me, I don't know if all of you are having allergies this year, but I've never had them before and I've got them, so apologize. That's our big thing. That is potentially a 5 to 7 billion gallon a year market. Right now today, ethanol use in the United States is about 14 billion gallons, and then we're gonna export about a little over 14, and then we're gonna export nearly 2 billion. So we're about 16 billion gallons. If we could turn E15 into the new normal, like E10 is today, that could be 5 to 7 billion gallons of additional market. That would carry us through a number of years as we try to develop some of these other new markets. So you might think, well, how can we compete in all these low carbon markets? So I want to go back and talk a little bit. It goes back to some of the things that we were saying earlier about solar. You know what the best solar panel is in the world?
Corn.
Right there. If you can Google this. If you don't know what Google is, you'll have to Google that. NASA has satellite imagery of photosynthesis. Now in the summer, Brazil beats us in the winter because we're cold. But in the summer, when we're growing crops, if you look at that picture, the color for photosynthesis is twice as bright in the Corn Belt as it is in the rainforest. Twice as bright. There is more photosynthesis by far going on in the Corn Belt than in the entire rainforest region in Brazil and the other areas down there. Again, on a year basis, maybe they beat us, but in the summer, by golly. So the point is, this is a solar. Next time you see a cornfield, think, wow, that's a pretty good solar array. You know what the world's best battery is? Kernel of corn. It's dense. It contains a lot of energy. You can store it. You can transport it easily, and then when you want it, you can process it and get that energy out. A kernel of corn is about a third protein for the livestock. It's about a third carbohydrates, starch, which we can turn into energy, and it's about a third CO2 that the corn plant sucked down when it was growing. So that's the best battery. I'm sorry, Elon Musk, but that is still a better battery than anything Tesla's got. So how do we get low carbon? Right now, the corn sucks down CO2 in the air, takes moisture, photosynthesis, and creates that wonderful little battery we call a corn kernel. And then when we ferment the corn in the ethanol plant to make it into ethanol, there's CO2 created, which we vent into the atmosphere. Now you think, oh, that's bad. That's CO2 going in the atmosphere. It's called biogenic because it's the same CO2 that the corn sucked down earlier in the year. So it's just an annual cycle going over and over and over. That's why we're low carbon. There are other energy inputs, which means we're not carbon free, but we're low carbon because of that. Now, what we're hoping to do, and this is where I'm going to get controversial, if we're going to compete in these markets, they don't want low carbon ethanol. They want really low carbon ethanol. They want really, really low carbon ethanol. We can do that. We can do that by breaking this carbon cycle, disrupting it, capturing this carbon in our plants, which is easy to do, it's inside a vessel, and putting it back underground. Unfortunately, we don't have, despite what you might have read, we don't have any known areas to do that in Iowa, so we have to put it in a pipeline and ship it to North Dakota or Illinois, which has been a little bit of a challenge. But if we disrupt this carbon cycle, we go from I'm not going to bore you with all the megajoules or whatever, because I forget, but we get a carbon score of 55 right now, typical Iowa ethanol plant. If we just do that one thing, capture that carbon, put it back in the ground, that knocks 30 points off our carbon score. We're down to a 25. What's that mean? We have federal policies. I won't bore you too much. You might hear something called 45Z. If you care about ag, listen to it. If Treasury does the rules properly, it's going to be a game changer. If not, well, we'll see what happens. But that's worth not. Actually, darn it, hit the wrong button. Sorry. By knocking your carbon score from down here to down here, that's worth $50 million to a typical ethanol plant. A typical ethanol plant makes or loses $4 or $5 million a year. That's worth $50 million. Now they'll end up having to share that with other parts of the supply chain, but that's the value that we'll add. This is huge. This is a game changer. And I just put this in here because this shows where we're at. CCS gets us down here. Here's everything else right now, unless someone comes up with a better mousetrap. Here's other things we can do. -9, -1, -3, -0.8. There's nothing else out there in our toolbox that we can do that even remotely lowers our carbon footprint like carbon sequestration. And oh, by the way, this is pretty inexpensive. This is like cost the same as building your plant over again. It's about 50% of the original CapEx it would take to do combined heat and power. These other things are membrane recovery, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is here, this is a huge opportunity, and I just hope that we can come together as a state and find a way to make it a win-win. You know, I grew up on a farm that has a pipeline underneath it, and the back corner of it got chopped off for an airport expansion. No one in the state knows about eminent domain more than I do. That's my home farm, the one I grew up on. But I also know that we've got to find a balance to help these projects go forward while being respectful of the property rights, or I'm very concerned about where we go. Because we've got to make these markets happen. So why? Here is demand, not counting ethanol. You notice how this is pretty flat? Goes up about 55 million bushels a year. This is what farmers do. This is 1980, this is the year 2020, but it's just a straight line. They just keep producing more, and this is on the same acres. This is on the same acres. Corn producers for the last 40 years have increased production of corn by 210 million bushels a year on average. Obviously, Mother Nature puts a few wiggles in that line, but that's the average. Our non-ethanol growth in total demand, including exports, is 55. So every year we're producing 210 more, and there's only demand for 55 of it if we don't go find a home for it. And we've tapped out our domestic market. Hopefully E15 gives us a bump. The next big markets that can suck up what the farmers are doing are things like sustainable aviation fuel, sustainable marine fuel, sustainable heavy duty. All of those things will happen only if we can be low carbon. You're not going to pay more for the same carbon fuel. There's no economic incentive to do that. There's no environmental incentive to do that. So if we don't do anything, here's what our economic firm said would happen. Basically, over the next 20 years, we don't need 20 million acres of corn. I suppose there might be some out here who think, hey, they'll plant less corn, that's good. Okay, but think about what that does to the economy. Corn is our cash crop. We produce it very efficiently. We have the world's best land. We do it more efficiently than anywhere else in the world. If we don't have demand for that corn and we stop planting as many acres, farm income is going to take a huge hit. The farm economy is going to go in the tank. It's not going to be very, very good. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. We have really a fork in the road where, all right, we don't have any use for this. What are we going to do with it? I eat a lot of meat. Are you going to double your meat intake? I mean, we're keeping up with that. So our only low carbon is our opportunity. So we're either going to tell farmers, stop producing, reduce your income, do other things, or we're going to go on to these new markets. Sustainable aviation fuel, 100 billion gallons a year worldwide. 100 billion gallons. Again, we produce 14 billion gallons of ethanol today. 14 billion. The worldwide total for sustainable aviation fuel is 100 billion gallon market opportunity. That market alone, if we got into it and made it happen, would basically eat up all that extra corn that we're going to produce for the next 30 years. It could literally be a generational demand driver. Something we haven't seen since the 20 years that ethanol sucked it up. So, I'm actually not as late. I'm known for talking way over my time. I'm doing pretty good. I might even have time for some questions. So I'll just end with this. Forget the politics of it. Forget how you feel about carbon. Our markets are being driven by carbon. So as a good business, that's what we want to do. There are tools out there, but we have to be allowed to use those tools, or which side of the fork do you want to be on? So with that, thanks for having me here, and I'm happy to answer about how you use ethanol on your weed whacker or anything else. I saw a hand here, and here, so I'll try to be fast.
Can you manage the demand for E15 to offset the large carryovers that we have now?
Yeah, so the question was, would E15 help with the large carriers we have now? Absolutely. Right now, it's only year-round in less than half of our country because of a quirky federal rule that some in the petroleum industry have been very successful in keeping in place. So we're trying to get that rule changed through, it takes legislation, and the person blocking it is retiring this year, where hopefully the next committee chair won't block it. But if we could get year-round E15 and make it the new normal, it would probably buy us 5 to 7 years of what we're talking about here, which would be enough time to get these other market, no pun intended with sustainable aviation fuel, but to get it to take off. Because they're not gonna happen tomorrow. They're not gonna happen tomorrow. So E15, if you remember that bullet point slide, E15, year-round E15 is key because it's the short-term thing that we can do instantly, over the next 2 or 3 years, really push that into the market.
Will that whittle down the carryover problem?
For that period of time, yes. And that's assuming we can start selling it year-round nationwide and that retailers do it. We're very close here in Iowa to having, quite a bit of our fuel be E15, but that's not the rest of the country. Yes?
Has there been any studies with the automotive industry saying that the E15s and the E-gases and ethanol produces less wear and tear on the internal combustion engine, taking a place that you have to maintain oil and all that?
Yeah, not so much wear and tear. There's certainly no, all these engines are designed to run on it, right? So I'd love to be able to tell you yes, but I will also tell you the opposite's true. We're getting longer use out of our cars than we ever did before. When you use ethanol for octane, you're replacing, getting in the weeds here a little bit, something called aromatics, benzene, toluene, xylene. Those are not only nasty cancer-causing chemicals, but they're very hard on rubbers and plastics. So ethanol is actually pretty good. The one big fuel economy study that California did on E15, they weren't happy with the results because I don't know why California hates ethanol, but they do. They actually found that it depended on your vehicle model, but on average, E15 actually got better fuel economy than E10. You hear a lot about, well, it has less BTUs. Yes, but engines have brains now, and they mix the air-fuel ratio based on the octane level and NOx and compression and all this stuff. If you want to really motorhead out, I can do that afterwards. But I drive E85. That is 85% ethanol, so there is a mileage loss there because it's so much ethanol, but it's really like 15%. So it's still the lowest cost per mile fuel because it's priced so much lower. It's still the best bargain that you can do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
With the expiration of the Farm Bill and just that big looming question mark, what do you see your market doing until we figure out if it's an extension or not?
The good news is, actually biofuels policy has probably had a bigger impact on, and I've seen the National Corn Growers President say this, that the energy bills are more important to farmers today than the Farm Bill. Now, the Farm Safety Net is separate from the Farm Bill. That has not expired. That would be the big one, the crop insurance programs. And this is one of my pet peeves. So I'm going to tell you a secret, because you won't read this in the papers. The Farm Bill actually hasn't expired. There's permanent Farm Bill law that was enacted all the way back in the 50s that it would take an act of Congress to repeal. But it's antiquated. If we don't do something, we actually fall back to that law, which would be god-awfully expensive. The price of milk's going to quadruple. It makes the government set quotas and tell farmers how much they can plant. It was a real kind of New Deal, command and control, top-down farm bill, and then we just passed these 5-year farm bills that replace it. But when that farm bill expired Monday night, we actually technically just rolled back to the permanent law, which is a nightmare. But funding for many of the programs went through the end of the year. I think we'll get through the election. They'll at least do an extension in what they call the lame duck, and we'll get on. So I don't think there'll be any short-term impacts.
I hear of research into making ethanol from switchgrass and algae and such. How does that affect what you're talking?
Yeah, I think, cellulosic ethanol, as we call it, has been 5 years away for the last 30 years. You might recall that a big company called Poet, another big company called DuPont, actually built $200 million plants to make it out of corn stover, which would also be similar to how you make it out of switchgrass. Those plants aren't running today. If we had $200 barrel oil, I think, you know, we can do it. It's just not cost effective. So right now, I don't see a big role for that in Iowa because of our fertile farm ground, you know, maybe in niches. But, you know, I've had people tell me, well, if you planted all this acres of corn to switchgrass, you could actually get more tons of biomass, and therefore, in theory, although again, it didn't work out economically, but in theory, you could get more gallons of ethanol per acre from switchgrass, or giant miscanthus is another thing they use, than you can with corn. And I said, yeah, in theory, other than it's not cost effective, but let's just, you know, forget economics for a second. And I say, okay, how many billion people do you want to starve? Remember, we just take the starch. Whenever you hear some of these people say, oh, we should just plant energy crops, or we should just do this, or we should just do that, we should just put up solar arrays over the crops instead of growing the crops. Just remember, that might make a lot of BTUs of energy, but you just killed a lot of people. You just starved a lot of people. Only since the 1950s has the world agricultural production exceeded the number of calories needed to feed everyone in the world. Now, due to wars and economics, I wish I had a magic wand where I could magically spread it out, but today we produce about 1.4 calories versus the 1 that we would need to keep everybody fed if we could magically disperse it. If we take literally the world's most productive crop ground and stop growing protein, you're literally consigning people to starvation. So I'm not big on that. Now, if we go to some ground that's in you know, south and west and it's dry and it won't grow corn and soybeans and other, you know, wheat, hey, there's some opportunities there, but right now they haven't figured out how to do it cost effectively yet. The number one rule in sustainability is profitability. If it's not policy can make it that way and whatnot, but if it's not profitable, it's not sustainable.
Last question.
Last question, Nicole.
Can you touch on the ownership structure within the ethanol plants within Iowa? I know early on, like grassroots funding, farmers chipped in. What's the percentage?
Oh boy, you know, I should know that. If you go to our website, hey, it's up there, IowaRFA.org, you can click on ethanol as a list of ethanol plants. You can pretty much tell from that. If it says Valero, it's not locally owned. If it says the Andersons, I mean Cargill, ADM, but all the others are local. So we're a majority locally owned still, by far. But I don't know if it's 70, 60, but well, there have been combinations. Ironically, most of the combinations were kind of the corporate structure ones combining to become bigger corporate structure ones. Most of those local ethanol plants, I think because they had farmers that understood corn markets and stuff, they actually weathered some of the ups and downs pretty well. No questions about weed whackers either, all right?
Monty, thank you for the great presentation. Thank you for what you do for the Iowa economy. So appreciate that. Upcoming meetings. We have a great slate of upcoming speakers. Next week we have Ann Selzer, political pollster. We have the retiring chief of police, Dana Wingert, and we have the CEO of Prairie Meadows, Gary Palmer. So be thinking about a guest that you could bring to one of these upcoming meetings. Be sure to reach out to Kitty by Wednesday at 9 a.m. to let her know about you bringing a guest. She also wanted me to share that the offices will be closed Tuesday through Friday of next week, as she and President-elect Tim will be heading to the annual large club conference hosted in Memphis, Tennessee this year. So stay out of trouble, Tim.
What about Kitty?
I don't think I have to worry about that. Okay, upcoming events. We have 2 morning fuel coffees scheduled. The next one is October 29th, so put that on your calendar, October 29th at 9 a.m., Freedom Blend Coffee. We will highlight our own Matt Busick, who will tell us about his, I can tell you, amazing life story of positivity and perseverance in the face of some challenges. And then we've also scheduled the next one for November, but we pulled it up earlier to November 12th, our own Tanya Wenzel, executive with EMC Insurance, will talk to us about her impressive career, and then we will take the rest of the year off for the holidays. So please join us October 29th and November 12th. All right, lastly, our strategic pillars. But first, again, let me thank our guests for coming. Monty, thank you. It was great to be able to recognize Ian today, and thank all of you for coming. So in the next week, Rotarians, please think about what you can do to impact one of our 3 pillars. So as we said, think about bringing somebody to the club. Just you run into somebody, just talk to them about Rotary. And like Gene and Cassie said, tell me more about it. And then here they are today. So think about that. Think about reaching out to a Rotarian who's not here today and seeing how they are, or grabbing a cup of coffee, or think about writing a check for a Coke. All of those support our 3 strategic pillars for the next 3 years. So make it a great Rotarian week. We are adjourned.